There's an uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Most people prefer to live in the comfort of their beliefs rather than face the anguish of questioning them. And what's most disturbing is that this blind faith, this unshakable confidence in what you've always believed, is precisely what keeps you prisoner to a life you never consciously chose. Have you ever asked yourself how many of your deepest convictions are truly yours? Because there's an abysmal difference between believing something because you've carefully examined it and believing something simply because it was repeated to you enough times. Blind trust isn't just naive, it's dangerous. And right now, as you listen to these words, you're probably internally defending some belief you've never truly questioned. Let me show you something that will change your perspective forever. We live in a paradoxical era. Never before in human history have we had access to so much information, and yet never before have we been so susceptible to believing sophisticated lies. Critical thinking should be our most powerful weapon, but we've traded that sharpened sword for the comfortable pillow of blind trust. And we do it because thinking critically hurts. It requires effort. It demands that we face the possibility that we've been wrong for years, perhaps our entire lives. The ancient philosophers knew this. Socrates wasn't condemned to death for having answers. He was condemned for asking questions. His crime wasn't heresy, it was discomfort. Because when you start questioning, when you really start thinking, you become a threat to all those who prefer to sleep in the illusion of certainty. Blind trust builds walls, critical thinking builds bridges, but first it must demolish those walls, and that demolition is terrifying. Think about the beliefs you inherited. Your parents told you what success was, society dictated what happiness was, your culture defined what was moral. And you, probably without realizing it, accepted all of that as if it were absolute and unquestionable truth. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than building your own philosophy of life from scratch. Blind trust is inherited. Critical thinking is conquered. Here's the psychological trap. Our brain is designed to save energy. Thinking critically consumes enormous mental resources. It's much more efficient, from an evolutionary perspective, to trust what the tribe tells us, follow the herd, accept norms without questioning them. That's why blind trust feels so natural, so right. Your brain is chemically rewarding you for not thinking too much. Every time you accept something without questioning it, you receive a small dose of dopamine, a mental pat on the back that tells you, "Good job, you just saved energy." But here's the problem. That efficiency is costing you your freedom. When you observe the masses, when you see how millions of people can simultaneously believe something completely absurd, you're not seeing stupidity. You're seeing the evolutionary triumph of blind trust over critical thinking. You're seeing brains doing exactly what they were designed to do, survive with minimum possible effort. The problem is that the rules of the game have changed. In the modern world, survival doesn't depend on following the herd. It depends on thinking for yourself. But what does it really mean to think critically? It's not simply doubting everything. That's another common mistake, another trap. Extreme skepticism is just blind trust in disguise. It's blindly believing in disbelief. True critical thinking is a delicate dance between openness and skepticism, between listening and questioning, between trusting and verifying. It's the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in your mind simultaneously without your brain collapsing in panic. Here's something few people understand. Critical thinking isn't natural, it's unnatural. It goes against all our deepest tribal instincts. That's why it feels uncomfortable. That's why, when someone challenges your most deeply held beliefs, your first reaction isn't curiosity, it's defense. Your body literally goes into survival mode, as if someone were physically attacking you. Because for your primitive brain, questioning the group's beliefs is equivalent to being expelled from the tribe. And in the evolutionary past, that meant death. So when you defend your beliefs without examining them, you're not being logical, you're being tribal. Modern psychology has documented this exhaustively. Confirmation bias isn't a bug, it's a feature. We seek information that confirms what we already believe and automatically discard what contradicts it. Not because we're bad thinkers, but because thinking otherwise requires monumental conscious effort that goes against our basic programming. Blind trust is the path of least resistance, and humans, like water, always seek the path of least resistance. But here's the question you should ask yourself: how much is that easy path costing you? If this idea is already resonating with you, if you feel that growing discomfort that indicates something true is being touched, stay with me. What comes next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself. And if you decide to embark on this complete journey, consider subscribing, because these conversations are rare and precious. Now let's talk about something more personal. Think about that moment in your life when you blindly trusted something or someone and that trust betrayed you. We all have that story. Maybe it was a relationship that seemed perfect until it wasn't. Maybe it was a career they promised would make you happy, but only left you empty. Maybe it was a political ideology you passionately defended until you discovered its lies. In that moment of betrayal, what did you feel? Probably anger. You probably felt stupid, but let me tell you something liberating. You weren't stupid, you were human. And that experience, however painful it was your brain finally waking up from its evolutionary sleep. It was the moment when reality hit so hard that your blind trust couldn't protect you anymore. Most people respond to that pain by building even higher walls. They become cynical, distrustful of everything and everyone. But that's not critical thinking. That's unprocessed trauma. True critical thinking emerges when you can look at that experience and say, I'm not going to stop trusting, but I'm going to learn to trust intelligently. I'm not going to stop believing, but I'm going to believe with my eyes open. There's a paradoxical beauty in this. Critical thinking doesn't make you less compassionate, it makes you more discerning. It doesn't make you less capable of love. It makes you less vulnerable to manipulation disguised as love. It doesn't make you less spiritual. It frees you from dogmas that were never spirituality in the first place. Think about the people you admire most. Those who have truly achieved something significant in this world. They're not the ones who blindly followed the laid-out path. They're the ones who questioned, who dared to think differently, who paid the social price of leaving the herd. Steve Jobs questioned the idea that computers had to be ugly and complicated. Marie Curie questioned the idea that women couldn't be scientists. Gandhi questioned the idea that resistance required violence. Every significant advance in human history began with someone questioning the blind trust of their era. But here's the secret nobody tells you. Critical thinking is also painful because it separates you. When you start questioning the shared beliefs of your group, you automatically become a stranger. Your friends may distance themselves. Your family may worry about you. Society may label you as problematic, rebellious, or simply difficult. And that hurts deeply because humans are social animals. We need belonging almost as much as we need oxygen. This is the great test. Are you willing to endure the loneliness of independent thinking to find the truth? Or do you prefer the comfort of the tribe, even if it means living a lie? There's no universally correct answer to that question, but there is a correct answer for you. And finding that answer requires you to ask yourself deeper questions. What's more important to me, truth or comfort? Would I rather be right or be at peace? Do I value my authenticity more or others' approval? Blind trust promises you peace. Critical thinking promises you freedom. And here's the irony. The peace that blind trust offers is fragile because it's built on lies. And sooner or later, reality comes to collect its debt. The discomfort of critical thinking is temporary, because once you find solid truths to stand on, you obtain a much deeper peace, a peace that doesn't depend on ignoring reality. But there's an even deeper secret that few people know, a truth that can completely transform your relationship with trust and questioning. Here's the revelation. Critical thinking and trust aren't enemies. They're partners in a delicate dance. The problem was never trusting. The problem is what you trust in and how you do it. There's something we could call intelligent trust, which is radically different from blind trust. Intelligent trust says, I'm going to trust, but I'm going to verify. I'm going to believe, but I'm going to keep my eyes open. I'm going to commit, but I'm not going to abandon my capacity for discernment. The ancient Stoics understood this perfectly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything you hear, examine it against reason and nature. Accept nothing that hasn't passed the tests of your own reason." But he also wrote about the importance of trusting in the wisdom of the universe. There was no contradiction in his mind because he understood that critical thinking doesn't make you less capable of trusting. It makes you wiser in whom and what to trust. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Studies show that people who practice critical thinking aren't unhappier. In fact, they report greater life satisfaction in the long term. Why? Because they make better decisions. Because their relationships are based on reality, not illusions. Because when they trust, it's earned trust, not naive trust. Here's the practical path. Start small. Don't try to question all your beliefs simultaneously. That's a recipe for mental collapse. Choose one belief, just one, and examine it honestly. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Who taught it to me? What evidence do I have? What would happen if I were wrong? These simple questions are revolutionary when you apply them honestly. And here's the trick. Don't be attached to the outcome. True critical thinking requires intellectual humility. It requires you to be willing to change your mind when the evidence demands it. It requires you to be able to say, I don't know, without feeling like you're losing something. In fact, I don't know is one of the most powerful phrases in the critical thinker's vocabulary. Blind trust never says, I don't know. It always has answers, it's always certain, it always knows exactly what to do. And that certainty is seductive, especially in times of chaos and uncertainty. That's why we see the resurgence of extremisms, of simplistic ideologies that promise easy answers to complex problems. People are tired of thinking, and blind trust offers them rest. But that rest is the sleep before the storm. Because we live in a world that's becoming exponentially more complex. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, climate change, global economic crises. These aren't problems you can solve with blind trust. These are problems that require sophisticated, nuanced, humble, critical thinking. They require that we can hold ambiguity, that we can navigate uncertainty, that we can change our strategies when conditions change. The future doesn't belong to those who have blind certainty. It belongs to those who can think clearly in the midst of chaos. So here's the synthesis of everything. Blind trust defeats critical thinking, not because it's superior, but because it's easier. It's the path of least resistance in a brain designed to save energy. But easy doesn't mean correct. Comfortable doesn't mean wise. And popular definitely doesn't mean true. Critical thinking is a practice, not a destination. It's something you must cultivate daily, like a muscle that atrophies if you don't use it. It requires discipline. It requires courage. It requires you to be willing to be uncomfortable, to be wrong, to be alone when necessary. But in return, it offers you something that blind trust can never give you: real freedom. The freedom to choose your own beliefs. The freedom to change your mind, the freedom to live authentically instead of living on autopilot. This is what I want you to take away from this conversation. Your beliefs don't define you. Your capacity to examine them critically, that's what defines you. Your willingness to question, to learn, to grow, that's what makes you human in the deepest sense of the word. Blind trust turns you into a biological robot executing inherited programming. Critical thinking turns you into the author of your own life. The choice has always been yours. It always will be. You can stay asleep in the comfort of blind trust, or you can awaken to the uncomfortable adventure of critical thinking. I can't make that decision for you. Nobody can. But I can tell you this. Once you taste the freedom of independent thinking, you'll never want to return to the prison of blind certainty. So I leave you with this final question. What belief are you defending today simply because you never dared to question it? If this message resonated with you, if you feel it touched something real and profound, I invite you to like this video, leave a comment sharing your most honest reflection, and subscribe to the channel because these conversations are rare in a world that prefers superficial entertainment to profound truth. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's asleep in blind trust, share it with them, not as an attack, but as an invitation to awaken. Because in the end, true trust isn't blind. True trust is informed, it's conscious, it's chosen, and that's the only trust worth having.